So thanks, everyone. I'd like to welcome our first speaker, financial and political journalist and editor, Bernard Icky, and we'll keep some questions to the end. So welcome.
Thank you very much. It's fantastic to be here, to wake you all up after lunch and to try to give you some insight and explanation about what's happening in politics, in economics, society. Why on earth is all this strange stuff that we're seeing happening? You know, why, for example, are governments all over the world deciding to ditch solar and go back to diesel? Or why are people saying, it's just woke to try and recycle things? Or why are politicians saying, bugger it, let's just put up tariffs again, like we did in 1930? You know, these are the things that make me scratch my head. I'm guessing that every day you wake up and look at the news and think, what? So I'm going to try and explain a bit about that, and in particular focus on why New Zealand's economy just doesn't seem to be taking off, even though the Reserve Bank has cut the official cash rate 225 basis points in the last year. And we've got a government which says it's very pro-growth. Why is it really not taking off? And also, we've got a government which isn't surging ahead in the polls or is very high in the polls after 2 years in government. Most governments are well ahead after 2 years in their first term, and this one isn't. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. But the first thing I'm going to do is provoke you, get you thinking, try and work out which tribe you're on, by asking you what you think, how you feel about this picture of road cones. Are you from the sort of, health and safety part which looks at the road cones and great, that's a broken leg that isn't going to happen. That's a kid that isn't going to be run over. You know, that's a piece of infrastructure that's being rebuilt. Isn't it great? Or are you one of those people who's parked there in your car, shaking your fist out the window, going, road cones, where's Simeon Brown when you need them, road cones? What's that number again to call up about road cones? I'll come back to road cones because I think they're one of these perfect examples of how what I call policy by meme has taken over, and how it is that we are responsive to policy by meme. Why do we believe this stuff works? Turns out there's enough people who believe it works for politicians to decide it's worth following. Right, now, you're providing products, working with customers who often are selling things to the public. Fast-moving consumer goods, perhaps. Not so fast-moving consumer goods. Durables, not durables. Basically, there's a customer at the end of the line. Are they buying the thing? Are they buying the service? How do they feel? How do consumers feel right now? Do they feel spendy? Do they not feel spendy? That's why I look at consumer confidence surveys very closely. Not just from an economic point of view, but from a political point of view. Because it turns out, and I learned this from John Key actually, I got him talking one day over a couple of coffees, and he wasn't telling me any great secrets, but one thing he said to me was, as a politician, I always look at consumer confidence. That tells me how happy people are and where the economy's going. And he's right, it's a nice leading indicator. This is the measure, and it came out just a couple of days ago in New Zealand, monthly from the ANZ Roy Morgan survey. Is now a good time to buy a major household item? So fridge, TV, those sorts of things. And if you're feeling spendy enough to buy one of those, then you're in a good mood. And you can see that the blue line is how confident people are. Remember, below zero means you're net not confident. And the red lines are actual real retail sales. So that tells you what's the connection. Turns out if people say they don't want to buy a TV, they won't, and the TV will stay in the showroom. So that's worth watching. Now, you may be thinking, boy, it's been tough lately. How come the stuff isn't selling? How come things aren't moving? Just seems really weird. Well, it has been, you're right. So the yellow line there is real card spending. When I say card spending, that's debit and credit card spending, electronic card transactions, spending per capita through June for the last 22 years. You can see that since 2022, New Zealanders have been spending less in inflation-adjusted per capita terms than they have since 2014-15. So we are back where we were in 2014. We're back at 10-year lows for per capita inflation-adjusted spending. So consumers are really not very happy at the moment, and they're not spending, and that may explain why you're seeing your customers go, boy, gee, it's tough at the moment, tougher than I expected for longer than I expected. And that's the reason. Now, one of the things that I'm going to try and get across to you today, hopefully I can convince you. By the way, John Key said some really interesting things like this about this a couple of days ago. And the guts of it is, our economy is a housing market with bits tacked on. So that means when people's house prices go up to record highs, they're more likely to sell their house because they feel like they're getting a good price. And because the value of our houses is so important for our personal finances, particularly if you're getting a bit older and you're looking to crystallize some of those gains you made in your house and you want to maybe free up some money to downsize or upsize or help out your kids or whatever it is. If you can't sell your house, if you don't want to sell your house, then things slow down, because that cash transaction, or the cash that goes from one person to the next when they buy a house, it goes around in the economy. People go and buy curtains, people buy cars, people decide to, buy a trampoline, whatever it is. They might move from an expensive house to a cheaper house, a bigger house to a smaller house. They might move into a retirement village. Have you seen all those ads and papers for retirement villages lately? Oh, the deals. Well, it seems like a deal. They never actually cut the price. They just give you, free TVs, the ones that don't sell in the shops. Monthly sales. So this is a measure of how active our housing market is. And you can see there that obviously it was going gangbusters during COVID when interest rates were cut to naught and the Reserve Bank was printing money and giving it for free to the banks. It was going very strongly through 2014-15, and that was partly because rental property investors saw interest rates falling, and they weren't at that point restricted much by the Reserve Bank's loan-to-value ratio restrictions. Things quietened down from 2016 onwards, in part because the Reserve Bank tightened those restrictions. Then, of course, COVID happened, and one of the reasons COVID happened and the market went nuts is that the Reserve Bank took off those loan-to-value ratio restrictions. Eventually, they put them back on again. I think it was one of the biggest disasters of policy making in the COVID period. And then it's quietened down a bit. And basically, we've been bumping off the bottom ever since. Our housing market is now in a great standoff, where people who own homes and would normally be thinking about moving on, maybe they're in their late 60s, they're thinking about the retirement home, maybe they want to start a new business, they've got some equity, they're not being forced out of their home. The banks are not selling people out. Mortgagee sales are still in low single digits nationally per month. That compares with hundreds per month during the global financial crisis. People are not stressed, those ones who would be looking to sell their homes. And so they don't sell. They say, I'm going to wait. If I wait for a year or so and prices rebound to their highs, I can make, because sometimes the house is still leveraged, I can make hundreds of thousands of dollars in savings. This is my time when I make my money. And so they don't sell. And so the whole market's looking at each other and going, well, I'm not going to pay that price. Prices could fall a bit further. I'm not going to try and catch a falling knife. And if you're a seller, you're going, well, this is New Zealand. You just wait for a bit and it'll bounce back. But it hasn't. And I'll try and explain why. But just to give you a sense, this is GDP per capita. At the moment, we are looking at a good, according to the latest forecasts, we're looking at a good 7 or 8 years before GDP per capita gets back to where it was in 2022. In fact, at the moment, we're back at sort of just after COVID levels, which is not great. And to give you an idea of how long this recession is likely to last and how deep it is, we are currently in the orange line, and you can see we're as deep as the GFC recession and the Asian financial crisis recession, and according to the Reserve Bank forecast currently, it's going to last longer than any of those. So this is worse than even the 1991-92 recession. Now, here is the reason why the economy is not picking up. Our housing market with bits tacked on needs fuel. It needs fuel for its fire. What is fuel? Credit, mortgages. And so this is a chart showing, going back to 1990 for fun, how much extra credit gets pumped into the housing market from banks, right? So what is the lending growth? Mortgage credit growth. And you can see here, I'm just going to zip over here, but you can see the chart over there for those people. Hopefully this is a pointer. Anyway, global financial crisis went negative. That's actually the 1999-2000 dot-com bubble burst and the end of the Asian flu. Here is COVID. Here's that period after COVID. And currently, credit growth is running about 2% per annum. Typically, we do not get a housing market really booming again or even surging again until we're over 4%. So why aren't the banks out there lending? Why aren't people borrowing? It's because house prices are 10 to 20% below their peaks and have been that way for 3 years. That's longer than any New Zealander alive has seen nominal house prices below their peaks for that long. We're essentially stuck in a Mexican standoff where sellers are waiting to get back to the peak, buyers don't believe it, there's not enough lending going through, and then on top of that, the Reserve Bank has restrictions on first home buyers through loan-to-value ratio restrictions and debt-to-income multiple controls. So when people say, don't worry, all we need to do is cut interest rates and things will get cracking again like they always do, the difference, the most dangerous phrase you can hear from anyone in economics is, it's different this time. But it really is different this time. And the difference is house prices are still below their peak and significantly below their peak, and they don't look like they're going there anytime soon. The Reserve Bank restricts lending to both first home buyers and rental property investors with LVRs and DTIs. And the banks, unlike in 2020, unlike in 2012-13, the banks have had their capital requirements increased by the Reserve Bank. They now have to put aside double an amount every time they lend. Remember, banks, if they lend you $1 million, they have to put aside $180,000 of their own in reserves before they can make that loan. It didn't used to be $180,000, it used to be about $90,000. So every time a bank makes a loan, now they have to put money aside. This was something that Adrian Orr did in 2018-19. It's still rolling through, and the banks hated it to bits. I think it's one of the reasons Adrian Orr left in an awful hurry without telling anyone why. He probably did some shouting at the time. We know he did. Right, so what's happening in this period? So interest rates have come down. The housing market's not really going. Where is the money going? What on earth is happening to the money? Is it being spent on fast-moving consumer goods and slow-moving durables and all the things that your packaging is around? Where is it going? Turns out it's being used to repay debt. People are actually keeping the same payments as interest rates fall, and they're reducing their debt even faster. And I'm going to ask you 4 questions today, like a quiz. Mostly it's to make sure that no one is asleep. So 4 questions. The first question I'm going to ask you today, and it's like multiple choice, 3 questions, and I'll ask you to put your hands up and I'll take a note and try and remember. I want to ask you, firstly, how much do you think term deposits, total term deposits in the New Zealand banking system, increased since 2000, so since COVID? Do you think it rose 5 billion to 100 billion? Do you think it rose 10 billion to 150 billion? Or 50 billion to 250 billion? Remember we've had a cost of living crisis? How on earth could people put money aside? So, who thinks it was just 5 billion to 100 billion? Anyone? No? 10 billion to 150 billion? Well, you're all very well informed. So, $50 billion extra in term deposits has gone into banks in the last 5 years. So when you hear politicians, and you hear on the radio and all sorts of things, we're in a cost of living crisis. All these people can't afford the butter. The butter, the butter. Well, someone can afford the butter. They're just not spending it on the butter. I learned today. Oh yeah, no. I'm not blaming. No. I'm not blaming anyone. All right. I'm here in this part of town from somewhere else in Auckland, and when I said I was coming here, everyone said, "Right, are you going to Costco? Can I give you my order?" No. So the cash is being used to repay debt, and it's going into term deposits and increasing. So the money is going to people who already have it, and they're not spending it. That's one of the right reasons why the cash is not circulating. The other thing to know about our housing market with bits tacked on is it really gets cooking when the housing market gets cooking. It really gets cooking when we have a lot of population growth from migration. So you can see here through the 2000s, particularly 2001 through to 11 or so, we had quite a lot of net migration out. Net migration in, and that was after a whole bunch of New Zealanders went to Australia. Then from 2013 onwards, both flavours of government used migration to boost the economy. Then, of course, COVID happened. They couldn't come. Then they really came. And now they've stopped coming again because the work isn't here. And how unhappy are people about this? Well, it depends who you are. This is a survey of rental property investors that asks the question, are you concerned about low net migration? Now, why would rental property investors be interested in net migration levels? More people means higher rents, of course. Right now, they are at record concern levels because rents are not rising. And one of the reasons is that net migration is not very high. In fact, net migration of foreign workers in is still quite high. It's about 30, 40,000. It's just being offset by a whole bunch of New Zealanders leaving. So that's the problem there. Now, one of the other reasons why the economy is not really kicking in is that the government is actively looking to reduce its deficit and to reduce its borrowing. That's its core thing. It's very proud about it. We're out here to say, right, our job is to get government spending under control and to stop borrowing. And why? Because that reduces mortgage rates, doesn't it? Well, sort of. This is a chart that looks at total Crown, what they call PPE, property and other capital investments in the next 4 years. So they're the blue lines there. The green is what we call the aspirational stuff. So this is what the government thinks it might spend money on. It's its contingency. It hasn't actually identified how that money's going to be spent. What we know is that often when you say you think you're going to spend, but actually your main aim is to reduce spending, you don't spend it. So actually the government's planning lower capital investment and infrastructure spending over the next 4 to 5 years. That's because they're choosing not to borrow and choosing not to invest because they think it's good to have mortgage rates down. The problem, I think, is that they don't understand this time's different. The housing market's not taking off, and the people who are getting the cash are saving it and not spending it. Right, this is fresh off the charts, and I'm going to ask you a couple of questions now that flow on from this. So, the first question is, young women, 18 to 49, who do you think they're favouring voting? So, do you think they're 50-50 opposition government, so opposition, Green, Labour, Te Pāti Māori, government, National Act, New Zealand First. So do you think young women are 50-50, that split? Or do you think they are 40% in favour of the government, 60% in favour of the opposition, or 30% in favour of the government, 70% of the opposition? See, all right, good, you're onto it. Now, this is a bit of an obvious question then for the next one. 50-plus-year-old men, that's me. That's young, sorry. I should have tested this one with my wife. She would have said, you're going to get pulled up on that, and she's right. This is for statistical purposes. So 50-year-old men, you know, the ones who shake their fists at the cloud, bloody road cones, bloody woke people, bloody road cones. What's wrong with butter? So which way do you think they vote? Are they 50-50? Or are they 60% in favour of the government, 40% in favour of the opposition, or 70% in favour of the government, 30% in favour of the opposition? See. I suspect I'm not very good at this whole, you know, keeping it secret till the end thing. I'm the guy who has all the spoilers, I'm afraid. So this is from last night, the Roy Morgan poll showing that Labour is up a bit, National's down a bit, ACT down a bit, New Zealand First up quite a bit, road cones, Te Pāti Māori down. So in the end, the guts of that is it's still basically 50-50. And at the moment, just marginally, the government stays using the current MMP model and some bets about who gets electorates and things. So, again, this is a chart showing the correlation between consumer confidence and confidence in the government. So remember I said at the start, John Key said, watch consumer confidence? He's right. And in July, there was another slump in consumer confidence and confidence in the government. That question, is the government on the right track or the wrong track, took another dive. Now, people haven't made that leap yet to saying, we don't like the government, to actually saying we like the opposition. They're not quite there yet. But they're not happy with the government. They're not happy with life. They're not happy with how much money they've got. They're really not happy with butter, the price of butter. And there's a bunch of them that really, really, really hate road cones. So the demographics from last night's poll shows you that women aged 18 to 49 currently favour the opposition 63.5 to 33, so on a rate of 2 to 1. And obviously there's a few people who vote for a few others. And the men, it's almost exactly the opposite. Now, this is really developed in the last 4 or 5 years in New Zealand. It's even more obvious in places overseas. So overseas, 18 to 29-year-old men in the United States overwhelmingly voted for Trump. 18 to 29-year-old women, even more overwhelmingly, voted against Trump. There is a gender split going on all around the world in how we vote and how we feel. And it is weird, and I don't understand it, but it's a thing. Now, here's, I think, one of the reasons we are seeing this stuff. So, who here bought an iPhone 4? Oh yeah, hot stuff. Came out in 2010. You may ask, why the iPhone 4? What about the iPhone? That was the hot thing that changed everything, right? 2007, Steve Jobs, this changes everything. Just one more thing? No, it was the iPhone 4. Why? Because it was the first phone with a front-facing camera. That meant you could do a selfie. That meant you could join a tribe online with Instagram. That meant you could start to communicate with your tribe, with your friends, your family, Instagram, Facebook, all of the others. You could suddenly connect with people in a way that you hadn't really thought about before. Why? Because just in 2010, 4G started rolling out around the world. in great form. So you could get your data. In fact, in the United States, they were giving away iPhone 4s if you hooked up to their network, and they gave you all you could eat data. Now, eventually they had to roll that back because the volumes were just too much. But this was the first iPhone which had a big enough processor, enough memory, cameras on the front and the back, and could use big honking data networks, so you didn't worry anymore about whether you were downloading a video or a photo. That was the moment Instagram took off. It was the moment that Facebook and Google, so Zuckerberg, Page and Brin, had these all hands meetings. You know, you have some sort of crisis in the company and you get everyone in to say either you're all sacked or we're going to change everything. And what Zuckerberg and Page and Brin did was brought everyone in and said, right, well, they did it a little bit with the iPhone, but this was the thing that scared them witless. They came in and said, we are no longer companies that do PCs. We don't just do the internet, we are mobile-first companies. We are smartphone-first companies. Everything we do is all about the smartphone. Google went and gave away an entire operating system, Android, to Samsung and the Chinese, just so that Apple had some sort of competition. And Facebook basically completely transformed its business from being all about on the PC to all on the phone. And I think this is the most consequential, shocking, important, transformational technology in the history of the world. Here's why. So it's as far back as I could go to get the number of smartphone users globally. So back when the iPhone 4 was launched, less than 500 million people had smartphones around the world. By now, we're up to 5 or 6 billion. No other technology in the history of the world has grown and become totally accepted and used everywhere in the world that fast. Steam engine took 100 years to get around. The machines you have in your packaging facilities, you know, versions of them were around 150 years ago. Probably powered by steam or water or something, now powered by electricity. But even electricity took 100 years to really travel around the world. This took less than 10 to get into the hands of every human in the world, to give them extraordinary power, they think, to talk with each other, to form communities, to have political debates, to buy stuff, to see advertising, to spend their time. Right, this was the one I was going to ask you, but I realised you're too bright for me. The question was, what percentage do you think of New Zealanders spend more than 7 hours a day looking at the internet or on their phone? Turns out it's 12%. Half of New Zealanders spend 4 hours a day or more on their phones and on the internet. 4 hours. My headline is, I wonder why productivity growth fell globally after 2010. Sorry, I had to put that in. That is an extraordinary thing. Humans are doing something for 4 hours a day they didn't do 10 years ago. They are soaking in it. We are soaking in it. Our kids, our parents, everyone's soaking in it. Totally shifting things. You know, 200 years ago, most people couldn't read. Now everyone pretty much can. 15 years ago, no one was looking at smartphones because they didn't really exist, or they were too expensive, or they didn't really work. Did anyone have it? Did anyone have this 3G smartphone? I had a Trio, a Palm Pilot Trio, anyway. It didn't work. These ones work. That is a transformational change. And what it has done is give people the ability to go onto platforms, connect with other people, debate, they think, with other people. Actually, they're more like shouting at them. Form tribes, work out who they are and who they aren't, yell at the people they know they aren't, get together with the ones they think they are. There's not a lot of connecting and real conversations going on. There's a lot of shouting. And unfortunately, it's meant that all around the world, we're becoming more polarized. So, and one of the things that actually it's reflected in the way we think about the economy too. So this is a fun chart. So who was president in the United States from 2016 to 2020? Donald Trump. Then it was a President Biden. 2020 to 2024. And you can see here, when Trump was in power, Republicans thought the economy was great. When the Democrats were in power, Republicans thought the economy was awful, and vice versa. This is a survey done over the last 6 or 7 years by Pew in the United States, asking people the question, do you think the other side, Democrats, if you're a Republican, are closed-minded, dishonest, immoral, unintelligent, lazy, or all four? And you can see here, people are thinking more and more bad things about the other guys. Everyone, when you see an opposition view, you think, oh, they're bad. They're doing that in bad faith. They're either dumb or they're trying to pull one over me. You know, I'm in my tribe, you're in your tribe. Ah! Sorry, that was a bit loud. So the point I want to make here, and give you time for questions, is we're living in a polarized world where strange things are happening. The world's largest economy is choosing to tax consumers through a tariff system which will slow global trade. Globalization of trade lifted billions of people out of poverty, but it also meant that 100 million people in the United States believed that their lifestyle was worse, that their power as consumers was worse, that they couldn't have the middle class dream. And to be fair to them, they were right. And because they're revolting against that, and they're angry, and the systems we have, these phones, make us angrier, and we're more likely to listen to someone online who's also angry. There was no one angrier than Donald Trump. And he's always angry, isn't he? There was a great question a BBC journalist asked him a couple of weeks ago in a phone call. President Trump, do you trust anyone? And he said, come to think of it, no, I don't. It's extraordinary. Every time, he's grumpy all the time. I mean, maybe that's an old man thing, you know, 50 plus. Now, the reason I say this is that you may be seeing decisions being made by governments. These are sensible, you know, big organisations. They have processes, and hopefully there's some sort of evidence and consultation, and you know, it's sensible. They've talked to everyone in the industry. They're not going to do something that's just dumb, and that's happening. And in all sorts of ways, you know, this thing about we're not going to do solar, we're not going to do renewable because it's woke, because it's, you know, it's going to be, it's something you do when you care about the environment. You shouldn't care about the environment. You should care about the bottom line. You should care about getting something cheap. Who cares about that stuff? I'm not going to be alive in 10 years. I just want to run over those bloody road cones. Why is this road cone in my way? Get it out of the way. Apart from anything else, you know, this infrastructure that's being built, I'm not going to get the benefit of it in 20 years. I won't be here. And so that group of people, the 50 plus men, the ones shaking their fists at the cloud, the ones who ring up News Talk ZB, they are the ones who are being courted by the politicians. So if you're 60% in favour of the government and you're 50 plus, Simeon Brown and David Seymour go, yes, it worked. I talked about potholes and road cones and it worked. Brilliant. Is there anyone else I can have a go at? Any more of those wokesters? I'll jump on them. You know, and often they're doing things to trigger support or opposition, one way or the other, often trolling, you know. And you can see that I'm not going to try and go back, but too far. But that's the guts of it. We are in a polarized, deglobalizing world where, unfortunately, because of this technology change, strange things are happening. And we should think about that when we're trying to plan our businesses. And if you're trying to channel, what is it the other guy would think? What is it that really not really matters, but what is the thing that people are trying to appeal to? It is 58-year-old man shaking his fist at the clouds, going, it was the cloud seeding that made the flood, not the climate change. Climate change is a hoax. Anyway, on that note, I'll hand it over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bernard. Thank you very much. Does anybody have any quick questions? Yep, there are there's a few. Okay.
Right. Go for it. I always go for the people at the front of the class.
One of the things at the Packaging Forum, where members of the Packaging Forum is really contemplating and looking to take forward is mandatory product stewardship schemes, where collection, recycling, all that infrastructure is funded better because it's mandatory to have a levy up front on the packaging by the brands. Obviously, there's a lot of engagement with government, civil servants on wanting to take this forward and start to catch up our jurisdictions. But I think some of what you described towards the end of your talk, those kinds of tensions around cost of living, bottom line versus environmental benefit, we can see. So, we have heard from the minister at different times, actually, it was, Chris Hipkins took a container return scheme just for bottles off in the bonfire policy
No.
because he was worried about cost of living. I know you're not like working with it or, like that kind of coming from a political advisory, but what kind of advice would you give to the Packaging Forum in terms of positioning the benefits of these schemes? Because if we've got this 5-year recovery, this really slow recovery, things like what we're trying to see happen here could just keep getting kicked down the road further and further.
Yeah, it's all about the framing of it. Is this something that the green wokey left wanted to do? Or is this something that regular hardworking Kiwis want to do? Is this something that's going to make something cheaper or better for average Kiwis? It's all about the framing of it. And sadly, it's about making sure that it feels like their idea. I mean, any organisation, how do you make something happen? Make it seem like the boss thought it was his idea or her idea. And that's one way to do it. But the problem now, I suppose, from a positioning point of view, is that a lot of this stuff is positioned as, oh, that's from the sustainability brigade, right? That's from that ESG stuff. I mean, what Trump is doing in the States is the most extreme version of what we're talking about. But the government is literally going through legislation, going through government documents, going through websites, often with AI, picking out the trigger phrases, equity, sustainability, climate change, all of those words, and literally like plucking them out, killing them, shutting down websites, that sort of thing. And so it's going to be hard to try and reposition, but my view, I'm from I think, reasonably new sort of camp on the political spectrum. And it's only been a year or so I'm still sort of feeling it out. But there is a new group of people who are talking about abundance. So this is the idea that what you need, if you're a progressive or left person, I suppose, is you want to convince everyone and show everyone, and do it, that you can come up with a lot more houses, a lot more cheap electricity, a lot more public transport, essentially make the cost of living cheaper by bringing down rents and the price of houses, by bringing down the cost of transport, and by bringing down the cost of electricity. And this is very doable. We just need to build a shed load of houses, not sheds, but actual houses. And we need to build and put solar panels and batteries everywhere, plaster them, because the economics are there now. And that's a different positioning. That's not saying, I'm doing this for the planet, I'm doing this for my grandkids, or I'm doing it because it's the green thing, or because Gaia told me to. I'm doing it because it's cheap and it'll make sure that my kids don't go to Australia. That's the sort of thing you can talk about. The other thing is also to be quite strategic and targeted about who you think you're appealing to. So those 18 to 49-year-olds, they are the ones buying the stuff from the supermarkets, right? They're the ones who care about whether there's too much packaging or whatever. They're the ones who are focused on it. They don't buy, and they become increasingly alarmed and oppositional to the whole 50-plus man shaking his fists at the road cone. And they're going, F that, I'm all for solar and all the green stuff. So it depends on who you're trying to appeal to. And of course, there's always the idea of just, wait until the government changes. That seemed to work for the other lot in terms of, just wait, bide your time, and when you get in, just torch the earth of everything, right? And that's actually not very good for anyone. And you're right, I think ultimately you need to build up a basis of support across as many people as possible. But unfortunately, it's not very easy now because people tend not to have reasoned, thoughtful, careful conversations and deliberations anymore. They quickly take positions. They quickly decide if something's good or bad. Now that's because of our fight or flight drugs that are being triggered in our head every time. New Zealanders now pick up their mobile phone on average 200 times a day. So that's at a voter level. Of course, the policy advisor wouldn't be doing that, but anyway, that's the guts of it. Sorry, next question.
Okay. I'm going to interrupt you there. Thank you very much, Bernard. Look, I know there's a few more questions. Bernard is with us after, but we've got another couple of speakers we want to move on. So thank you very much, Bernard, for your time.